Hello, hello. My name is Jennifer Kenney-Smith. I'm the area sales manager for civilian sales at GitLab, and it is my distinct pleasure to introduce my friend, powerful thought leader, digital transformationist, Vidyut Desai, who is newly recognized as the CIO at FDA. And Vid was one of my first members on the podcast with ATARC over a year ago. Good afternoon, good morning, Vid. How are you?
Well, good afternoon, good morning to you as well. I'm doing well, and it's good talking to you again.
Yeah, so we have seen some radical shifts in the last year, well, 2 years really, and at the helm of it, HHS, FDA, pandemic, vaccines, COVID, all the things, and technology as well. And you lead the charge there. The last time we spoke, I remember asking you at the close of our podcast, what happens if you don't transform fast enough, if you don't shift? And you said 1,000 people were dying a day without the vaccine. And I have used that quote over and over again to push and impress upon leaders of transformation that there is major digital transformation requirements, and you can't always just wait and watch for someone else to do it. And you've done it and you're doing it. So bravo, my friend. I'm so impressed with you and your leadership and what you've accomplished. Can we just jump in and go over what's happened in the last year in your world?
Absolutely. A lot has happened. So obviously we've been progressing our mission goals through the Technology Modernization Action Plan, the Data Modernization Action Plan. And one of the things we have found as we've been progressing this transformation on the technology side is that you cannot transform technology without transforming people. And I think I spoke a little bit about that in the past. So changes in culture and stuff like that were very prominent in our thinking. But we've added another angle to our transformation as well, which is you also have to transform business processes. And I think over the last year, we've spent a lot of time thinking about and moving towards how do we also, in parallel to modernization, modernize our business processes. Because what we found is in the past, technology modernization essentially meant replacing old boxes with new boxes. And when you do that, the IT people think we're modernized, we're using new tech, and we've got these shiny new boxes, but the process is still the same old process. And so the business folks don't see the value in this, or they don't see what's changed. What we've started doing at the FDA is thinking about how do we also modernize the business process. In fact, you want to modernize that business process first before you put the shiny new technology behind it. And that's a shift in culture and thinking that we have really started adopting at the executive level. We formed this new enterprise transformation operation team, which is leading the charge at looking at our key enterprise processes and optimizing them first. And then we're supporting those changes through technology. So one area that we've been doing a lot of work on, and this is an area that was affected by the pandemic, is our inspections area. Obviously, we couldn't send our inspectors out in the field during the pandemic for their own health and safety. And we depend on these inspections for a lot of our safety monitoring and surveillance work. And so there's a bit of a backlog that's built up. So now what we're doing is we're looking at those processes and seeing how can we make them pandemic proof going forward using technology, so that in a future pandemic, we're not having to stop or pause those types of very important inspections. But before we do that, what we want to do is we want to take a holistic view at inspections end to end, optimize the entire thing, and then apply technology. So we're completely taking a modern approach to inspections going forward. It's a huge piece of work that we're embarking on, and I'm excited about the enterprise transformation operation team doing the business process optimization, and then the technology and the data team supporting them in the new optimized way of doing inspections.
Super cool example. How do you prioritize out of all the verticals, if you will? For example, you had said, safety modernization was for the inspections was one area. Out of all the different areas with this new group, How are you prioritizing which is the most important and rolling that out?
Our mission essentially helps us make those determinations.
Okay.
So, we're in the business of safety and efficacy. That's what we do at the FDA. Our mission is to make sure that the products that people purchase that add up to 20 cents for every dollar that Americans spend, which is a huge portfolio. So all those products are safe and effective. And inspections is a very big part of that. So if you want to have safe products, we need effective inspections. And the more inspections we do, the safer our products can be. Again, I want you to imagine 20 cents of every dollar and the breadth of products we regulate. Foods, drugs, cosmetics, veterinary products. It's a huge portfolio, and we have 18,000 employees total. So to scale the effectiveness of those 18,000 employees to oversee the safety of that volume of products requires us to make very smart and effective use of technology. And inspections is one place that we feel that if we can optimize that process and make inspections more effective, it goes to the core of our mission on the safety side. So that's part of the thinking at the executive level that's prioritized that area. Congress obviously has also had a lot of interest in the inspections processes and making them more effective. And they've been very eager for us to resume our inspections processes as the pandemic started easing off. So there's political focus there, but there's also the mission focus there that helps us prioritize that activity.
It sounds like a pretty big undertaking, that program specifically. There's other agencies that I speak to that have large mission goals like that. How are you able to, or what methodology is your team using to kind of chunk that down to allow the milestones that are attainable in regards to what period and length of time are you looking to achieve this transformation of the safety inspection? So
our inspections program and the technologies and the data around that has been built up over many, many decades. Our past way of working had been very siloed. So what we have ended up with our legacy environment is this very siloed and fragmented environment. Going forward, what we're doing is we're taking an enterprise view. So we're taking a much more holistic view to the entire inspections process. So instead of thinking about, this is what CEDAR does and how CEDAR does its inspections, this is how CBER does it, or how CDRH might do things differently. We're now looking at all those centers and basically taking a holistic enterprise view of the entire inspections process. We have upwards of about 320 different types of inspections that we perform of the various products. And so what we're starting to do is we picked just a couple to try out a singular approach with a singular technology to make sure that everybody's comfortable with how this is going to work. And once we prove that case, we will then be using the same enterprise approach to redo all the rest of the 320, 330 types of inspections that we have. So for the first time, and I think this is a little bit unprecedented in FDA history, we are taking an enterprise approach to solving the inspections process instead of a siloed, fragmented process. And I think what we're going to end up with is a much more capable and frankly a much simpler environment to manage. In the past, I've talked a little bit about our cost profile from an IT perspective. We spend our legacy environment, because it's so difficult to manage and it's so fragmented, eats up pretty much our entire IT budget. We want to shift that to an approach where keeping the lights running, the O&M side, is only 70% of that cost. That leaves us 30% to grow and transform. As we rebuild this inspections program, we are keeping that very much in our mind. We want to make sure that the new environment that we build fits that profile where it can be maintained with 70% of the budgets that we have allocated for that, and that we still retain 30% of our budget to transform and grow that process, because we know these processes change and evolve over time. And so that's a sustainable budget profile for processes like that. So that's what's built into our new approach of how we're redoing our inspections work. It's a sustainable activity going forward. Not only are we going to fix it with a new modern approach, we want to make sure that it's sustainable over the long run.
Okay. Is there a sweet spot too between retiring some of the legacy that is so expensive and I call it like congested? It's just not, it's difficult. It's not easy to use, or it's outdated, to the new, the 30% that you'll see this like a shift between getting rid of some of the overhead of that cost model into the newer tech. I think new tech is always better, faster, cheaper, right? Do you see a timing or an idea of when that delta will shift?
It's going to happen reasonably fast. We're trying to speed that up as quickly as we can. Obviously, from a technology perspective, I think technology is actually the easier part. Putting in new technology, building the new processes is actually fairly quick and easy to do. Implementing that business change at the process level is the hard part. And obviously, these are operational processes. You know, they can't be stopped while we put the new in. You know, we've got to figure out a way where you know, I mentioned we had about 320 different variations of inspections. We can't just flip the switch in one fell swoop. We've got to basically replace these on a inspection type by inspection type. And so we've got to maintain the old systems running in parallel with the new systems that we're building. And that, you know, in the short term makes things more complicated, and frankly also makes things a little bit more expensive for us. And those are some of the things that we have to manage. Obviously, we have some constraints on the budget side. We have some constraints on the rate at which the business can absorb the change. People can absorb the change. So this is a very complex and very large change program that we're driving. And so we're going to have to take a bit of a thoughtful process. But I think, you know, I mentioned our legacy environment got built over many decades. I think we'll be replacing that in a matter of several years. But we want to do that in a thoughtful manner. And again, we have excellent support from our executive team to do this in a manner. You know, we'll speed up where we can. We'll slow down when we see issues. So we're going to have to be measuring and metering this very, very carefully.
Very mindful approach as well. So I have a CIO I interviewed, not formally on the podcast yet, but we were prepping for it. And he mentioned that in his agency, he's new to this agency this last 2 years. And he was finding that anytime he was encouraging his team to move more aggressively, the culture to shift, the business practices to change, adopting more technology, right? So pretty progressive, a little disruptive. And the pushback he's getting from the culture is, well, we don't do it that way. It's not in the handbook. We need more approval steps. And as he started unpacking all of these objections, it's not actually in the handbook, and it doesn't need to be that process because it's outdated processes. So he's actually taking the word waterfall out of his documents altogether because he doesn't want people to say and be held back. And I feel like you've probably seen this in regards to a year or two ago, very tech forward. And then you've seen that the culture has to actually shift, and you can't drag culture to shift. You have to encourage them and support them, right? So is this resonating? And have you figured out the way to lead and message to the culture how to gracefully get on board with the mission and the timing that is now?
Absolutely. You know, one of the things that I have found to be a very pleasant surprise is I'm still relatively new to the federal government, 2.5 years into the job now from the private sector. And when I first started, I think I heard a lot about, well, it's hard to drive change in government and that'll never happen, and all the usual things. What I have found actually that's been a pleasant surprise is I think the federal government is, and certainly maybe the FDA is unique, I don't know, but I think there's a lot of willingness to change. And whilst there still is, you know, some pockets of resistance, and, you know, there's always going to be some difficulty as you drive change. our executive team is very bought into this. We have a very seasoned, very qualified executive team. And as we've discussed what needs to be done and how it needs to be done, there's very strong support. And what I have found, and this is a lesson I learned in the private industry, if you're going to drive a change program, you better get your executive team lined up and aligned to that change. We're very fortunate in the FDA to have that very thoughtful, forward-thinking leadership team, and they've all aligned. They're all supportive of this activity. That makes driving that change a little bit easier. And in fact, one of the things I would say is, when I heard all the stories about how difficult it is to drive change in the federal government, I had kind of recalculated my timeline, thinking this is going to take longer than what I'm actually finding is we're moving faster than what the padding that I had assumed would happen, because it would take so long to change. I think there's another lesson here as well. Too often in IT, particularly in IT, we try to drive change way earlier than the business is ready to adopt that change. And when you do that, there's a lot of frustration. The business is not ready. IT is very excited about this new technology and what it can do. We try to push that, and if the timing is not right, you end up wasting a lot of energy. I think what I have found and what we have found at the FDA is the agency is ready for change, and so I think many of the programs that we're pushing for now, people are very receptive to them. And I think the pandemic has helped, I think, drive the urgency for that change. I think we've seen many of the challenges that we faced as, using some of the legacy applications, the fragmented environment that we have. And we've seen the impact and the opportunity that we have in a future pandemic, that, if we had different approaches, modernized approaches, we can do so much better. And so I think all of those things have sort of come together to really make our agency hungry for change. So I think, yes, there's always going to be some pockets of resistance and pushback, but I think the vast majority of the agency is ready to embrace change.
It's so refreshing. And I think that you can lead that charge for the listeners and the leaders to know that that can be an old school philosophy of the government. If they're ready, and there is the missions and the work is imperative, and the time is now that after the pandemic, I think everyone's ready to make an impact and to lean in and do more. And
solid as well, right? So I think one of the things that's very important is you have to, and I think this is something we don't do as well on the technology side, is oftentimes we push technology and the cool features and capabilities that a technology might have. What we don't do as well is push the business benefits that the technology can deliver. So I think when you focus on that benefit side, the business benefit side, I think people are much more receptive to that. If you're just pushing technology for the sake of technology, I think that's where people are less enthusiastic about the technology-driven change.
Yeah, so maybe we'll shift into, pull that thread, business benefits and outcomes. How are you, and honestly, this mindset comes from leadership. So this is your executive team and your staff following your vision, right? The difference is that you are an incredible leader. You have the vision and the capability and competency to roll these strategies out. So with the focus on the benefits and the outcomes, how are you measuring success and advocating what the benefits are to such a large business unit?
So I think when I joined the agency, certainly from an IT perspective, there was a lot of frustration within the IT teams because, again, I think, they had several experiences. Either they were trying to push something that wasn't well received at the business side. They were trying to do a lot of things where they felt that the funding wasn't made available. So there were multitudes of perceptions that people struggled with. One of the things that I've focused on, and I think this has really helped change the IT mindset, is, if we, one of the biggest benefit that we can sell is we're going to have to sell business benefit as opposed to the technology capabilities. And if we speak in those in that language, I think we're going to get better reception. I think the other part that I've been stressing a lot is we've got to get our financials right. We've got to get out of this nightmare situation that we had ourselves, where basically just keeping the lights running eats our budget up with little left for transformational growth. And so putting a strategy that changes that mix and gets us to that 70-30% mix that I spoke about, I think the IT folks understand that. They see the importance of getting to that sustainable model. Otherwise, we're always going to be short of money. We're always going to be frustrated that we don't have the dollars to maintain the existing environment, let alone meet the growing needs or the transformation needs of the business had. And I think when you're in that situation, your engagement is low, the culture is low, and people feel frustrated. So I think what we have done is show the IT team a more sustainable way where we don't have to be frustrated by budgets all the time. We don't have to be frustrated by a lack of resources. Let's get ourselves into this mode where we're on that 70-30% of target, and then we can have rational business discussions with the business folks that say, listen, if we're going to put in this new system, some of these old systems have to go away, because if we don't do that, we're going to get ourselves back into that unsustainable budget situation where we're going to frustrate you by asking you for more money all the time, and you're going to be frustrated by having lots of legacy systems and stuff around. So I think having some of those dialogues and showing the financial details behind that situation and what gets us in that situation and what types of actions gets us out of that situation really helps. That's what the IT folks are bought into. And I think that's what's helping them drive the change that they're driving. And on the business side, I think the business folks also understand that side. They don't want the IT guys coming to them all the time, looking for more funds, more budgets, and basically saying, well, we're going to need another 10% increase just to keep the lights running, let alone, and oh, by the way, those new business needs that you have, we can't meet them because, that's going to take another 20% of your budget. Everybody's resource constrained, and we all have to make a trade-off of decisions, and just asking for more all the time is never a good story. So we've come up with a way where temporarily we may need some additional funds to make the changes that we need to make, but long term we've actually shown them a scenario where we don't have to get into this discussions where IT budgets have to grow 20-30% every year.
You take a really nice approach with the business side of it. Can you remind, if folks weren't listening last year, your background? Because I feel like your approach is very CEO centric. You look at all the different metrics in the business as your tech and team and mission as a whole enterprise business, not just as we're in charge of only the technology. Can you kind of just share a little bit about your background and what brought you to this thought leadership?
Sure. So my career, I've been in the IT business for just over about 32, 33 years now. I spent my first decade in large pharmaceuticals. I spent the second decade in clinical research organizations, CROs, and my last decade was with medical device manufacturing. After that, I joined the FDA on the government side. I've always been on the other side of the FDA, so I think I got a pretty good perspective from different areas of healthcare. And then now I get to see life from the regulatory side, on the other side of the fence, as they say. I think the part that's influenced the majority of my thinking in terms of how I approach IT optimization comes from my last decade in the medical device manufacturing side. I worked primarily for private equity firms, which are very involved in buying and selling companies, putting a couple of companies together, optimizing them, and selling them off. So I think I got very good at optimizing things, and you're very financially driven in private equity. So I think that influenced a lot of my thinking around
Yeah, so your lens is very special. It's the hat of the business and the optimization. I think if everyone that's listening can understand and appreciate that. GSA had shared with us from the TMF group, I believe out of all of the money budgeted and spent for IT, that only 13% of the projects are successful. It's a very low number of success. And there's a lot of reasons behind why. I imagine how you're measuring your success from this business and financial lens, you probably have a much higher rate of success.
I think the results are yet to prove themselves, but I think if when I start shifting from the 95% O&M to something that's 70% O&M, I think that'll be meaningful. I think in the last year we have started to see that shift happen. We have started to reduce our O&M. Right now it's very small, but as we start transforming some of the big areas, inspections was one we talked about earlier. There's over 80, 90 different applications and systems involved in that. So over the next 3 to 5 years, as we transform and modernize that environment, that will very significantly start reducing our O&M for a very important and very large complex area. And when we start doing that on the supply chain side, on the regulatory review side, I think that shift will happen, and we will be able to measure that in that financial shift from that 95%, less than 5% O&M DME to 70-30. That's how I'm measuring that, and we're tracking that very, very closely. And every investment request that I get, one of my first questions is, how much O&M is this going to reduce in the long term? If we're going to put in, it's got to take something off. And I think we have to be very disciplined in that approach. Otherwise, if we just keep adding layers and layers of O&M without taking any of it away, you get yourself in an unsustainable environment. And I think there's a lot of federal agencies that find themselves there. So, and you mentioned the TMF. It's a really good program. It's something that we're actually working through our HHS partners to also make some proposals there. But I love the idea behind the TMF in that it's sort of positioned as a bit of a loan. They're not just giving you money so that you can spend it in the traditional way IT likes to spend money. It's there is a payback period that's required. And I think that's the smart way of incentivizing the kinds of attitude changes I think we need to see in the federal government and in IT in particular.
Yeah, I love their mentorship that comes with it too, that you're not in it alone, so they can then show and prove out that there is success criteria behind the funding. They want, and they're excited. They want to get their hands dirty with the new tech and the evolution of how to meet new mission, how to be successful. So that's a super cool team. I'm excited to hear that you all are working with them too. Is there anything that you learned in the last year or even the last 2 years with the pandemic from any project or program or something that shifted that you just kind of scratch your head and look back and think, I wish I knew this sooner, to help share how you've evolved as a leader or your team has grown?
I think the biggest lesson I've learned is not to give up, frankly. I think, this is advice I would give to any new person coming into the federal government. I think you get, there's a very loud chatter or noise that you get confronted with, that government is different, it's slow, it can't change, and all the usual stereotypical views of government. And I think that can be discouraging, and I think that could scare a lot of people away. I would say, hold tight. I mean, I think, if you step up to lead, you can change that trend. I like I said, my personal experience is the federal government is no different than private industry when it comes to change. Private industry struggles with change as well. So it's not unique to the federal government. Change is hard, regardless of where you try to push that. And it's hard in the federal government as well, but it is possible. You got to buckle down and work with your executive leadership teams and make it happen. So I think a lot of the stuff that I was getting told that would never happen or was impossible to do is possible. I think that's my first learning. The second part, I think, is the federal government can be can be just as agile as well. We started forming this enterprise transformation operation team about a year ago, and the general thought process in any in the government typically seems to be that it'll take about a year to get the reorg done or to form a team. It'll take you years to get any budgeting stuff done, and it'll take years before you can drive any change. From start to finish, when we started, when we first conceived the idea of this enterprise transformation operation team, we've not only formed it, we've staffed it now. There's a lot of details and folks there, but we've had tremendous people loaned to us to kind of staff that office, and now that team in less than a year has put together this transformation proposal for our inspections work, and our executive committee has bought into that. All of that in less than a year, from idea to actually making it happen, tackling one of the largest and probably one of the most complex areas that we work in the FDA. So, I again, even I thought that it would take longer, and I've been surprised, and I think that's partly because the FDA is ready for change. But I think I see so many leaders in the federal government talk about change. I think the federal government is ready for change. I think there's a hunger for change, and we just got to tap into that and make things happen. So yeah, don't take no for an answer, and don't listen to all those naysayers. I think it's as an organization, I don't think the federal government is all that different from large organizations that are just as change resistant and have the same challenges when it comes to transformation.
Yeah, great feedback, great advice. Any updates you want to share on the TMAP or DMAP?
Sure. So we're going to be doing in the next month or two, or very shortly, I should say, we are going to be publishing an update talking about all the exciting things and progress we've made both on the technology side as well as the data side. So we're very excited about that coming out very shortly. And we're also going to be following up our technology, the TMAP and the DMAP plans with a third plan, which I think is equally important. And I sort of hinted at that earlier, the Enterprise Modernization Action Plan. The whole idea and the thought process that we've put in through the Enterprise Transformation Operation Team, how to drive that business transformation and why it's so important to do that before you do the IT modernization. So we're excited to start putting some thought around that EMAP, as we're starting to call that. And that'll be sort of our third leg of our modernization tool. So the TMAP, the technology modernization, the DMAP, the data modernization, and the EMAP, which is the enterprise modernization, are the three legs of our transformation and modernization stool.
I love that you are transparent about your approach, your blueprint, right? The map, the design that you all are using, and that you share that content out. So impressive. Well, that's all the questions I had for you for today, Vid. Are there any last thoughts or wisdom that you'd like to share before we sign off?
No, I enjoy the conversation. I hope people get some useful bits of knowledge out of this, and I enjoy your podcast, and I look forward to hearing some more.
Thank you so much, Vid. You're a tremendous leader. Thank you for all that you do for us. So
Thank
great,
you.
so great.
Excellent.